How I faced the toxic friendship that almost destroyed my relationship and found my peace. I never imagined a relationship could be destroyed, not by a lack of love, but by the insistent presence of someone who refused to accept limits. At first it seemed simple, even banal, an old friendship of my girlfriend's that I believed was harmless. Raphael was the kind of person who would come in smiling, make jokes, and say he cared about her. But there was something hidden beneath the surface, a control disguised as care, a manipulation so subtle that for a long time neither Sabrina nor I could see it. Today, as I write this, I realize this story isn't just about jealousy or distrust. It's about how someone's toxic influence can corrode everything that's healthy, and how we need the courage to walk away from what makes us sick, even if it means breaking bonds that seemed unbreakable. My name is Gabriel, I'm 37 years old, and this story happened a little over 2 years ago. At the time, I was working in graphic design and was in one of the most stable periods of my life. I had achieved a balance that, until then, I thought was solid. When I met Sabrina, I felt like I was beginning a new chapter. She was sweet, intelligent, spontaneous, and seemed to understand me effortlessly. Our relationship flowed smoothly, with long conversations, easy laughter, and plans for the future. It was one of those beginnings that makes you believe that finally everything is okay. I had no idea that the real challenge was yet to come. Raphael entered my life naturally, as if he'd been a part of everything before I even arrived. Sabrina introduced me to him within the first few weeks. "He's like a brother to me," she said, and I, without reason to doubt it, welcomed him warmly. But soon the small annoyances began. Untimely messages, unsolicited advice, opinions about our relationship. Raphael always had something to say, always knew what was best for Sabrina. At first, I thought it was an exaggeration to find it strange. Today, I see that I was trying to be understanding with someone who never intended to respect my space. Over time, the boundaries began to blur. Raphael would show up unannounced, entering her home as if it were his own. He had access to her conversations, her social media, the details of our intimacy. When I talked about this with Sabrina, she begged me for patience, saying he was just protective, that he'd always been that way. I tried to understand, but something inside me began to fray. It was a constant feeling of invasion, of being tested, as if my love needed to be proven to a third party. And worst of all, I could see how much this confused her, as if she were torn between loyalty and affection. Conflicts began to emerge when I began setting boundaries. I asked her to talk to him about respect, about space, about us both. She tried, but his reaction was explosive. Raphael played the victim, cried, and said he was being left out. Sabrina, heartbroken, felt guilty. It was then that I realized the extent of the manipulation. He masterfully turned the tables, and I, no matter how hard I tried, ended up being the villain. It was the beginning of a painful process, an emotional drain that made me question not only the relationship, but also who I was within it. As the months passed, Raphael's presence stopped being merely annoying. It became oppressive. He commented on everything we did, criticized my actions, and insinuated that I wasn't good enough for her. There was always a subtle way he belittled me, as if he wanted to remove me from the picture without having to say it directly. And the most painful thing was seeing Sabrina believe some of what he said. Sometimes, a minor argument between us was enough for her to turn to him for advice. I saw the same pattern in his messages. He always portrayed himself as the hero, the friend who wants the best. Deep down, he just wanted control, and the closer he got, the further I drifted away from myself. I began to doubt my own perceptions. Raphael's manipulation was so well crafted that at times I thought maybe the problem was actually me. Sabrina said I was being possessive, that I was trying to distance her from someone important to her, and I, even though I sensed something was wrong, kept quiet to avoid further friction. This phase was one of the most difficult of my life, because I found myself trying to balance love, reason, and a constant feeling of helplessness. It was like being trapped in a triangle where one side always won, and it was never mine. I remember one specific weekend when everything exploded. Raphael showed up unannounced at Sabrina's house while I was there. He entered as usual without knocking. He started talking about her distancing herself from her friends, insinuating it was my fault. I tried to remain calm, but he provoked me, mocked me, and the atmosphere grew tense. Sabrina tried to intervene, and he, overcome with anger, pushed her during the argument. It was brief, but enough to make me lose my footing. At that moment, the penny dropped. This wasn't just emotional manipulation, it was abuse. And I knew that if I remained silent, I would be contributing to the same silence that kept her trapped. After that day, everything changed inside me. For the first time, I saw fear in Sabrina's eyes. She, who had always defended him, was shocked. He tried to justify himself, cried, and said he had lost control. But something broke in her, and in me too. It was then that I understood that love, no matter how pure, cannot survive in an environment dominated by fear. I spent days without sleep, feeling guilty for not having acted sooner, for having been complicit in the name of peace. But I also realized that that moment, however painful, would be the beginning of an inevitable change. Sabrina slowly began to pull away. Still confused, still trying to understand what had happened, but for the first time, she was seeing Raphael differently. He, on the other hand, intensified his attempts to control her. He called several times a day, emotionally blackmailed her, and spread lies about me among her friends. It was a silent, dirty war. I saw Sabrina trying to maintain her balance, but each day she became more fragmented. And I, even though I loved her, began to understand that perhaps my role at that moment was to help her break free, even if it meant losing what we had built. I reached a point where I no longer knew who I was within that relationship. Everything that had once been light became tense. I would wake up with a queasy stomach, waiting for the next conflict, the next invasion, the next manipulation. I began to distance myself from friends, decline invitations, and isolate myself. It was as if I were living around the moods of someone who wasn't even part of my relationship. The emotional burden was so great that I began to experience anxiety attacks. I slept poorly. I worked poorly, and my head kept spinning around the same question: how much longer could I endure this? Sabrina still tried to justify it, saying Raphael was going through a difficult time. But deep down, I knew this behavior had nothing to do with difficulties. It was pure control. There was a night when I really thought about giving up, not just on the relationship, but on everything. I looked in the mirror and no longer recognized the man I saw there. I was exhausted, resentful, and filled with a rage I couldn't even contain. The worst part of living under manipulation is that it slowly eats away at you, taking away your confidence, your clarity, your self-esteem. And before I knew it, I was at my breaking point. I thought about leaving, disappearing, starting over somewhere else. But something inside me, perhaps the memory of who I was before it all, stopped me. I didn't want to be defeated. I wanted, for the first time, to face it head-on. That's when I sought help. I talked to Bianca, Sabrina's brother's wife. She always had a very clear-eyed outlook on everything. I told her what was happening, and she listened to me without judgment. She said something that stuck with me. You won't be able to help Sabrina if you keep getting sucked into the same cycle she was. That hit me hard. I was so focused on protecting her that I forgot to protect myself. That's when I decided to set real boundaries. I stepped away for a few days, letting Sabrina feel the weight of my absence, not out of pride, but so she could see how much that dynamic was destroying us. During this separation, I received several messages from her, confusing and painful. She said she missed me, but that she was also beginning to see things more clearly. She said Raphael had tried to convince her that I was the problem, that she was being manipulated by me. But this time she didn't believe him. She said she felt ashamed for not realizing earlier how much he dominated her emotionally. It was one of the first signs that something was changing. I cried reading it. For the first time in months, I felt that perhaps there was still hope, not just for our relationship, but for her as a woman, as a person beginning to break free from a cycle of abuse. The final turning point came when she decided to cut contact with him. It wasn't easy. Raphael freaked out, made a scene, tried to get close to her family, and spread lies on social media. But Sabrina stood firm, and I stood by her side, not as a savior, but as someone who finally understood the value of boundaries. Witnessing her journey was both painful and beautiful. I saw a woman being reborn, rediscovering her own voice, and I understood that my own breakthrough lay there too, in stopping fighting the uncontrollable and learning to protect my own peace. When Sabrina finally cut contact with Raphael, the silence that followed was almost deafening. It was strange at first. She was used to his constant presence, texts, calls, unsolicited advice, and I too was used to living on high alert, waiting for the next attack. Suddenly, everything went quiet, and it was in this silence that the wounds began to truly bleed. There were no more distractions, no more excuses, just the stark reality before us both. Sabrina cried a lot, alternating between guilt and relief. I, in turn, had to deal with something I'd been repressing for months. Anger. Anger for having allowed so much, for having doubted myself, for having silenced myself in the name of love. It was a slow process, full of emotional setbacks, but also full of small advances that, little by little, rebuilt what the manipulation had tried to destroy. We decided to seek therapy, both together and individually. I needed to understand why I'd submitted so much to that situation. I discovered that deep down, I was afraid of loss, afraid of being seen as just another controlling man. This fear paralyzed me. Sabrina, on the other hand, discovered how guilt shaped her decisions, how her friendship with Raphael was actually a prison disguised as loyalty. The therapy sessions helped us name our pain, see patterns, and rebuild trust. It was a long but liberating process. For the first time, we were looking at each other without external noise, without third parties defining what we should feel. Over time, love began to breathe again, without the constraints, without the constant tension. It was like learning to walk again, slowly, carefully, afraid of stumbling. But with the will to keep going, Sabrina began to rediscover herself. She went back to hanging out with healthy friends, rekindled old projects, and little by little stopped apologizing for existing. I changed too. I began to prioritize myself more, to understand that healthy love doesn't mean sacrificing oneself for the other. I discovered that empathy and boundaries don't cancel each other out. They sustain each other. And the stronger I became, the more I could truly support her, without carrying the burden of salvation. Raphael, on the other hand, slowly disappeared. When he realized he no longer had power over her, he tried a few last-ditch maneuvers, dramatic messages, pleas for forgiveness, even attempts to play the victim to his family. But this time, it didn't work. Sabrina responded only once, saying she forgave him, but would no longer allow him to be around. She was firm, calm, and mature. I watched in silence, with a pride I couldn't contain, not because she chose me, but because she finally chose herself. And seeing it happen before my eyes was one of the most moving experiences of my life. Overcoming, for me, didn't happen overnight. It wasn't a clear victory with a happy ending and soundtrack. It was a sequence of small daily choices, not responding to provocations, not falling back into old habits, not losing myself again trying to prove something. It was realizing that sometimes winning is simply keeping the peace. Today, I look back and see how much I've grown, not only as a partner but as a man. I learned that loving someone isn't about protecting them from the world, but helping them protect themselves. And that, for me, was the purest form of love I've ever experienced. Today, when I look back, I see that the greatest battle wasn't against Raphael, nor against external circumstances. The greatest battle was internal, against fear, doubt, and the feeling of powerlessness. It was months of confronting feelings I'd avoided, of dealing with frustrations that silently consumed me. I learned that someone's manipulation doesn't define who you are, but it can show you how much you need to strengthen yourself. And in this process, I realized that true overcoming comes from within. It's not just about pushing a toxic person away, it's about allowing yourself to grow, protecting yourself, and reclaiming your own identity. Sabrina also changed profoundly. What was once blind loyalty transformed into self-confidence. She regained her voice, her opinion, and clear boundaries. I saw her struggle to free herself firsthand, and it inspired me more than any book or outside advice could. I learned that supporting someone isn't about imposing solutions, but being there as they find their own path. Sometimes, the strongest love is what allows freedom, even when freedom seems painful or risky. Today, we are both more aware of our limits and weaknesses. We talk openly, establish rules of coexistence, and respect each other's space. There are still moments of insecurity, remnants of the past, but they no longer dominate our lives. We've learned that vulnerability is not weakness, and that each challenge we've faced together has strengthened our relationship in a real, concrete way. The pain we've felt has fueled us to become more whole, more connected, more human. What I most want to share is that overcoming isn't magic. It's not a leap out of pain. It's an arduous process made up of small decisions, daily persistence, and the courage to face what corrodes us inside. It's learning to say no when we used to say yes out of fear of losing someone. It's rebuilding the self-esteem that's been shaken. It's understanding that limits aren't barriers, but bridges to healthy relationships. And above all, it's discovering that the peace we seek outside ourselves must first be built within ourselves. Today, I write here not just to vent, but to say that it is possible. It is possible to regain control of one's life. It is possible to love without losing oneself. It is possible to look at someone who caused us pain and still choose the path of serenity. Sabrina and I still bear the scars, but they don't define us. They have made us stronger, more attentive, more capable of protecting what is precious. And that is the essence of overcoming. Learning to be whole even after being broken.
Sylvia faced her toxic mother-in-law and saved her family from chaos that no one imagined existed. Sometimes life seems to follow a script we didn't write. When I married Gustavo, after years of trying to rebuild what was left of me, I truly believed I had found the rest I'd been searching for. I'd already faced grief, loneliness, and the fear of raising a child alone. So when love arrived again, I thought fate was finally being kind to me. Our home was simple, but peaceful. Matthias, my 11-year-old son, laughed more than ever. And when Heiter was born, it felt like the entire universe fit in my lap. What I didn't know was that, along with the joy, came a silent shadow. Alice, my mother-in-law, a woman who seemed incapable of seeing her son happy without feeling threatened. I remember the first look she gave me at the family lunch that marked the beginning of my marriage. There was nothing explicit, just a restrained smile, a touch of disdain, like someone assessing an intruder. That day, she commented on how much Bianca, Gustavo's ex-wife, was a family woman, someone who understood the role of a wife. I laughed awkwardly, trying to dismiss it, but inside something was already breaking. I wanted to believe it was just fleeting jealousy, a natural resistance to the new. But time would show that what Alice felt for me was far from simple. It was possession. disguised as concern. And I would be tested in ways I never imagined I would face within my own home. Before I continue, I need to introduce myself. My name is Sylvia, I'm 35 years old, and I'm writing this story years after surviving something that, for so long, shattered my peace. At the time, I was a teacher, a mother, a newlywed, and someone trying to start over after widowhood. I lost Renato, my first husband, in an accident that left me shattered. It took years for me to breathe without feeling guilty for being alive. When I met Gustavo, I believed love could heal what time couldn't. He was sweet, attentive, and with Matthias, he was everything I dreamed a stepfather would be. Believing this made me let my guard down, and perhaps that was my mistake. I didn't see the danger coming because I was busy being happy. The first few months were calm. Alice would come over occasionally, bringing cakes and gifts for the baby, and spoke as if she wanted to help. I thanked her, accepted her, and tried hard to please her. But her tone changed with small details. You should make the porridge the way Bianca did. Or, Gustavo always liked the house tidy that way. Each sentence was a fine, invisible needle, but one that left me bleeding inside. Gustavo, trying to avoid conflict, asked for patience. She'll get used to it, he said. I wanted to believe her, but what Alice did wasn't about adaptation. It was about domination. She couldn't accept that her son had started over without her command. And little by little, she began to invade the space that was mine. Everything got worse when she started coming into our house unannounced. One day I came home from school to find Alice reorganizing Heitor's room. The baby's clothes were folded differently. The mobile had been moved. This room was a mess, honey. I made sure to clean it up, she said, in the same sweet, venomous tone I was already familiar with. It made my blood boil, but I swallowed it. Gustavo urged me to calm down, saying she only wanted to help. But deep inside, something inside me began to crack. The feeling of invasion was constant. I would wake up tense, checking the clock, dreading the doorbell, and when she arrived, my entire body stiffened. I no longer felt like I owned my home or my life. The final straw came one Sunday. We were gathered for lunch, and, as always, Alice made a point of commenting on Bianca. She said she'd run into her former daughter-in-law at the market, and that she was even more beautiful and focused. She spoke as if gently planting thorns, and I felt my chest tighten. When I tried to change the subject, she laughed and said, "It's not jealousy, is it, Sylvia? You know Gustavo has always had refined taste." The table fell silent. Matthias, who had been eating quietly, looked up and stared at me, and that broke me. For the first time, my son was witnessing the venom disguised as kindness. I felt my face burn. Gustavo, uncomfortable, asked her to stop, but Alice just shrugged and added, "I'm only telling the truth, my son." I left the table and cried, locked in the bathroom. After that day, something in me began to change. The pain gave way to a mixture of anger and helplessness. I tried to protect Matthias and the baby, but it was like swimming against an invisible current. Gustavo, caught between his love for me and his fear of confronting his mother, began to lose his way. Sometimes he defended me firmly. Other times, he fell silent, and the silence hurt more than Alice's words. I began to feel ashamed of being sad, ashamed of not being able to cope. I slept poorly, woke exhausted, and any noise put me on alert. The house, which had once been a shelter, became a place of tension, and I, who had always been rational, began to feel like I was losing control of my own mind. It was during this period that Matthias, my sensitive and observant boy, began asking me questions I couldn't answer. "Mom, why doesn't Heitor's grandma like us?" I tried to hide it, but he could tell. He began to become more withdrawn, more irritable. One day, he cried, saying he no longer wanted to stay home when Alice came over. That hit me like a blow. I realized the problem wasn't just mine anymore. It was my son's too. I was allowing her presence to contaminate everything we were trying to build. And for the first time, I felt afraid I was repeating the same dynamic I experienced in my first marriage. The silence that destroys you from within, little by little, until only emptiness remains. I thought about giving up. Yes, I did. I even considered separating from Gustavo. Not for lack of love, but out of exhaustion. I loved that man, but I no longer knew if he was capable of protecting me from my own mother. I remember one night when he came home late, and I, sitting on the couch, poured everything out. I said I couldn't take it anymore, that I felt invaded, diminished, humiliated. He listened to me silently and cried. It was the first time I'd seen him cry. He said he was trying to balance everything, but no longer knew how. And in that moment, I understood that we weren't enemies. We were both trapped in the same web of manipulation that Alice had been weaving for years. In the following days, we decided to distance ourselves from her. Gustavo stopped answering daily calls, limited visits, and began setting boundaries. At first, it was a relief, but Alice didn't accept it. She began showing up unexpectedly, leaving aggressive messages, crying, saying we were destroying the family. And the pressure intensified when she started looking for Bianca again. She called her, badmouthed me, and tried to bring her closer to Gustavo. I heard about this from a mutual friend and trembled with rage. It was as if Alice was trying to erase me from existence. And for the first time, I felt the urge to stand up to her. Not for myself, but for my children. The day I decided to confront her began like any other. I was tired, with dark circles under my eyes, and my body heavy from swallowing so much anger. Alice appeared, unannounced, wearing that same sweet perfume that always made me nauseous. She entered as if she owned the house, looked around and said, "Everything's a mess, Sylvia. Bianca never left things like this." I took a deep breath, tried to contain myself, but this time something inside me snapped. I asked her to leave. She laughed mockingly and replied, "Who do you think you are to send me away from my son's house?" At that moment, my body trembled, but my voice was firm. "I'm the woman who lives here, and from today on, whoever enters or leaves this house is up to me." The silence that fell was deafening. She looked at me with contempt and left without saying anything. I was trembling, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was breathing fresh air. Gustavo came home from work and I told him everything. He was shocked, but he didn't scold me. On the contrary, he hugged me and told me it was time. For the first time, I felt like we were on the same side, and that gave me strength. Still, the battle was far from over. Alice called, texted, and made a fuss. She said I was stealing her son, that I was a cold and manipulative woman. She tried to shift the blame onto me, and for a few days I even doubted myself again. But Gustavo was firm. He changed the lock, blocked her number, and together, we decided to seek therapy. It was then that I realized how much I had neglected to exist out of fear of rejection. In the sessions, I began to understand that Alice wasn't just a difficult mother-in-law. She was the reflection of a woman who had never dealt with her own wounds. Her husband, Carlos, had cheated on her and humiliated her for years, and the pain she'd never faced had turned into control. I was just the latest target of her frustration. Understanding this didn't justify what she did, but it helped me see what was behind her anger. I also began to realize how I had become a hostage to the desire to please. I wanted to be accepted, recognized, validated. And in this quest, I'd lost respect for myself. It was hard to admit, but it was liberating. Over time, the distance began to work. Alice kept trying to infiltrate, but she no longer found space. Gustavo and I began to rebuild what she had nearly destroyed. Matthias began to smile again, and the atmosphere at home became lighter once more. There were still difficult days, moments when the fear of a new confrontation paralyzed me. But the difference was that now I knew who I was, and I no longer needed to justify myself. I learned to say no without guilt, to protect my space, and most importantly, to understand that love without limits becomes a prison. It was in this process that I began to rediscover myself as a woman, not just as a wife and mother. One of the most memorable moments happened months later, when I ran into Alice at a family party. She looked at me from afar, and for the first time, I didn't look away. She tried to get closer, but her tone was different, tired, dejected. She spoke little, almost without venom. I listened to her calmly, but without bowing. I left with one certainty. The peace I sought would never come from her acceptance, but from the respect I learned to have for myself. And it was like that, amidst wounds and lessons learned, that I began to understand the true meaning of overcoming. The rebuilding process wasn't quick, nor linear. There were days when I'd back off, afraid of giving in to the anxiety Alice provoked, and questioned whether I was being firm enough. But every little step forward counted. I began to prioritize my needs, organize my routine without guilt, and make decisions with confidence. Matthias noticed the change and began to open up more, talking about feelings he'd previously kept bottled up. He told me he felt safer, more protected. and I understood that every step I took wasn't just for my own peace, but for my son's emotional security. This sense of responsibility gave me the strength to keep going, even when I missed Renato so much, and even when my fear of Alice resurfaced. Gustavo became my true partner in this process, not just as a husband, but as an ally. We started talking about everything, setting boundaries, and deciding together what would be acceptable in our lives and in our home. I realized that while I was afraid to confront Alice, he also suffered from his mother's constant pressure. The difference is that, together, we began to transform the tension into action. We established clear rules, scheduled visits, respecting schedules, no comparisons or criticism. Each small victory reinforced my confidence in myself, and also the confidence Gustavo had in our marriage. We began to feel like we were, finally, a team. Over time, Matthias's perception of boundaries and respect changed radically. He began to speak up when something bothered him, and even to protect his younger brother, Heitor, when he noticed signs of manipulation or intrusion. It was incredible to realize that my example was teaching him not only how to deal with his mother-in-law, but with life in general. I learned that being firm, fair, and patient is a delicate but essential balance. Matthias looked at me with admiration, and I felt I was building not only my own peace, but also the foundation for him to become an emotionally healthy man. The emotional freedom I gained allowed me to see Alice from a different perspective. I still felt anger and hurt, but I was able to separate my emotions from her behavior. I understood that I couldn't control what she did, but I could control how I reacted. I learned not to internalize her criticism, not to allow her venom to affect my self-esteem. Every ignored call, every rejected visit, became an act of self-love. I discovered that boundaries aren't walls, but shields that protect what's most important: my family, my home, my well-being. The transformation didn't stop with me. Gustavo and I began spending more quality time together, rediscovering the complicity and love that had united us. Our communication improved, and with it, our mutual trust. Heitor grew up in a more relaxed environment, with clear rules and a constant presence of love. Matthias became more confident, able to express his feelings without fear. And I finally felt that the peace I'd been searching for wasn't outside the home, but within me. I had survived, grown stronger, and protected those I loved most. Alice's shadow still existed, but it no longer controlled the light we created within our home. Looking back today, I see how each hardship taught me something essential about myself and what it means to protect those you love. Alice, with all her control and venom, ended up being a catalyst for my transformation. For years, I believed I needed to be accepted by everyone, please everyone, and avoid conflict at all costs. But life showed me that this behavior only weakened me. I learned that respect and boundaries are non-negotiable, that love doesn't mean self-denial, and that creating a healthy home depends on the courage to face those who try to destroy it. This understanding became my foundation, my silent strength. Gustavo and I remain together, but our bond is now much stronger than before. It's not just love, it's partnership, complicity, and mutual respect. Every decision we make is based on dialogue and clarity, not fear or manipulation. We've managed to transform our home into a safe space where Matthias and Heitor can grow with self-esteem and confidence. Seeing my son smile, listening to his opinions, and realizing that he feels protected is one of the greatest rewards I've ever received. Learning to fight for my family's well-being was a painful but incredibly transformative process. Reflecting on this experience, I realized that my overcoming wasn't a single moment of courage, but a series of small daily actions. Each time I firmly said no, each time I respected my feelings instead of swallowing my pain, each time I protected my family from outside interference, I grew stronger. And this strengthening didn't come instantly. It came from ongoing work on self-knowledge and assertiveness. I learned to value myself, my choices, and to stand firm in the face of any pressure. There are still times when Alice tries to infiltrate me, but now they don't affect me. I've found my voice, my security, and my peace. I know not all conflicts have perfect solutions, but I've learned that it's possible to live with integrity and love, even in the face of toxic people. My life changed because I decided not to allow anyone to diminish my worth or interfere with my family's happiness. Today, I can look to the future with hope, knowing that, whatever comes, I'm prepared to protect my space, my children, and my marriage. Ultimately, I share this story with anyone who needs to hear that it's possible to overcome seemingly impossible situations. Pain exists, fear exists, and there will be times when giving up seems inevitable. But courage, even a small amount, is enough to change everything. I learned that love is also about fighting, that boundaries are essential, and that respect begins within ourselves. Today, when I look at my home and see Matthias playing with Heitor, Gustavo smiling beside me, and the feeling of peace filling every corner, I feel certain that we can do it. And this certainty, built through tears and challenges, is the greatest victory I could achieve.
Raphael destroyed part of a historic building and now faces consequences that will change his life forever. I never imagined that a simple metallic snap could completely change the course of my life. It was just another day at work at that historic building restoration company, a place that until then had represented stability, routine, and security for me. The smell of lime, damp wood, and paint was part of my daily routine, and I had grown accustomed to that setting of dust and ancient beauty. I was known for being agile, quick to make decisions, the kind of employee who didn't wait for orders to act. But this haste, this desire to solve everything at once, ended up being the trigger for my greatest downfall. When I heard the snapping sound coming from the structure I was working on, my heart raced. For a moment, I thought it was just a fright, but within seconds, I realized I had damaged something much bigger than a piece of wood. I had compromised part of a listed structure, and, with it, all the trust the team had in me. In the following minutes, the construction site descended into chaos. Voices clashed, eyes surrounded me, and all I could hear was one phrase hammering away inside my head. "It was you, Raphael." It pierced me. I tried to justify it, to say the project was poorly designed, the reports confusing, but deep down, I knew my inattention had cost me dearly. The director, Carlos, came to me with a heavy expression. He didn't shout, didn't accuse. He simply said, firmly, "Raphael, what you did could destroy months of work and a piece of this city's history." I was speechless. For the first time, I felt the true weight of the responsibility I carried in my hands, and I realized that, until then, I had never truly understood what preserve meant. In the days that followed, the atmosphere in the office was almost unbearable. Paula, the engineer overseeing the reports, avoided looking at me. Anna, my shift colleague, seemed torn between compassion and fear of getting involved. Conversations stopped when I entered. The sound of the keyboard, previously constant, was now piercing. The news had already reached the Conservation Authority, and Inspector Isabella would come personally to assess the damage. I slept poorly, waking up sweating, reliving that cracking sound every night. I felt ashamed, anger at myself, and a suffocating fear of what was to come. I was called to an emergency meeting with the board, and each step toward the room seemed to take me further away from the life I knew. Inside, it wasn't just Raphael being judged. It was the man who had to face, for the first time, the consequences of his own impulses. As I sat across from Carlos, Lucas, and João, I noticed how tense everyone was. The table felt like a silent battlefield. Lucas, the project manager, tried to maintain a diplomatic tone, but his fatigue showed. João, the head of accounting, looked at me with an expression that mixed pity and disapproval. "The company will have to pay heavy fines," Carlos said, and that plural in the company stinged because I knew it was my fault. He could have fired me right then and there, and perhaps that would have been fair. But instead, he took a deep breath and said, "You're going to have to help me fix this, Raphael. And more importantly, you're going to have to prove that you've learned the meaning of responsibility." I didn't understand it right away, but that sentence would become the beginning of my rebuilding. I left that room shattered. The pride that had always accompanied me seemed to have evaporated. On the way back to the construction site, every brick, every wall, every detail of the building seemed to be watching me. For the first time, I felt like I could truly lose everything: my job, the trust of my colleagues, and my self-respect. And it was there, in that heavy silence, that the penny dropped. I could no longer be the guy who rushed everything, who let his ego rule. I had hurt something that couldn't be replaced. History. And somehow I realized that if I wanted to stay there, I would need to rebuild something even more difficult than a damaged structure. I would need to rebuild myself. In the following days, I was temporarily removed from work at the construction site. The decision was fair, but it hurt. The routine that had once consumed me now felt lost. I stayed home, mentally reviewing every move, every hasty decision, trying to understand the exact moment I had crossed the line between confidence and recklessness. Messages from colleagues stopped. The team group, where jokes and photos of daily life had previously circulated, was now silent to me. The isolation was cruel. I realized how much I depended on it to feel like I belonged. I felt the weight of invisible judgment, and the worst part was that deep down, no one hated me more than I hated myself. I kept repeating out loud, "How could I have done this?" The question echoed, unanswered, as if each echo pushed me a little deeper into the pit. In the midst of this silence, I received an unexpected call from Carlos. He asked me to come to his office. His voice was calm but firm. I felt nervous. When I arrived, I saw that he had placed several folders, reports, and old plans of the damaged building on the table. "Sit down," he said. "I want to show you exactly what was affected." For almost 2 hours he explained the historical value of the piece, the impact of the damage, and the meticulous restoration process. I could barely look up. Then he said something that resonated deeply with me. "To err is human, Raphael, but to ignore what error teaches is a choice." I left that room with a lump in my throat. For the first time, it wasn't shame that dominated me. It was a genuine desire to learn and change. From that day on, I began to study on my own. I spent hours reading about preservation techniques, the invisible layers of an ancient structure, and the symbolic value each detail holds. I wanted to understand what I had previously treated as mere task execution. I discovered a new respect for patience, one I'd never possessed. I returned to visit the construction site, even though I couldn't work directly. I would stand there, watching Anna and Paula cautiously resume their work. At first, they avoided me, and I understood, but gradually I realized that my quiet presence, my less defensive posture, was beginning to speak for me. I was learning the value of listening, of accepting time, of respecting the process. It was Miguel, the former construction manager who had been fired months earlier, who helped me see something I hadn't seen before. He showed up one day to settle some issues with HR and recognized me in the hallway. "I heard what happened," he said. I expected criticism, but he just continued. "Sometimes we only learn to be careful when we feel the weight of having broken something that we can't fix with our own hands." That sentence shattered me. I began to see the mistake not just as a punishment, but as a mirror. Miguel showed me that within that disaster there was a chance to rebuild not the wall, but the man who damaged it. And that's when I began to truly rebuild. I asked to return, even if it was just to help with cleaning, cataloging, or document review. Carlos agreed with one condition: I want commitment, not rushing. And so I returned, silently, without the right to public apologies or acknowledgement. The first few days were difficult. Every glance pierced my skin. Some thought I was there out of pity, others said it was for lack of options, but deep down I knew I was there for myself. And as I became more involved in the smaller tasks, something inside me began to reorganize. I learned that humility is not the opposite of strength, it is its foundation. And the more I accepted this new role, the more I felt I was finally beginning to rebuild my own structure. Over time, I began to realize that the hardest part wasn't the physical work, but the emotional one. Being back in the place where it all happened brought me face to face with my ghosts. Every detail of the damaged structure was a silent reminder of my mistake. Sometimes I would stop in front of the place and just stare for a few minutes, like someone staring into a mirror of shame and learning. Paula gradually started to get closer. One day, while I was cataloging the reports, she sat next to me and said, "We make mistakes, Raphael. What matters is what comes next." That gave me a breath of hope. I realized that trust isn't restored with words, but with consistency, and that's what I set out to do. Show up every day, do my job to the best of my ability, without rushing, without trying to prove anything, just being present. Still, there were times when guilt engulfed me. At night, the sound of the crack returned like a recurring nightmare. I would wake up sweating, feeling like the wall was caving in on me. At these times, I wondered if I truly deserved a second chance. It was Anna who realized this first. One day she found me sitting alone in the courtyard and said, "You have to stop punishing yourself. The mistake was huge, but you're already paying for it. Now you have to live." That phrase stuck in my head for days. Little by little, I began to understand that my punishment was no longer useful, that continuing to wallow in guilt only kept me trapped in the past. And little by little, I began to accept that starting over was also a way to make amends. A new challenge arose when Isabella, the Preservation Authority inspector, returned to reassess the site. I was present, but avoided eye contact. When she recognized me, she simply nodded. I expected a harsh critique, but instead, she said something unexpected. "I see the work is being redone with great care. That's what matters now." It was a simple phrase, but loaded with meaning. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was recognition of the effort. I felt a pang of relief, and I realized that perhaps in some way I was beginning to transform my image from one of destruction to one of reconstruction. Over time, Lucas began to trust me again. He was the most rigid, the most demanding, and perhaps the one who suffered the most from the financial consequences of my mistake. One day, he called me in to review a new project, and before handing me the sheets, he said, "I trust you to get this right now." That, coming from him, meant a lot. I didn't need to say anything, just nodded. I felt like that was the first solid brick in the new foundation I was building. For the first time in months, I left work with a different feeling, not of guilt, but of purpose. I began to see that overcoming obstacles isn't a sudden leap, it's a ladder, and each step requires humility and patience. Time passed, and the building, little by little, took on a new form. Each restored part seemed to also symbolize a part of me that was being reassembled. I began arriving earlier, staying later, not out of obligation, but because I wanted to be there, to see the process unfold, to be part of every detail. My colleagues began to include me in their conversations again. The jokes returned little by little. That cold atmosphere began to warm up again, and I realized that collective forgiveness didn't come all at once. It was built in practice, day after day. And when finally I looked at the restored structure and saw that it was strong, beautiful, and preserved, I felt an emotion I had never felt before. True pride. Not of having fixed what I had broken, but of having transformed myself in the process. As the months passed, my routine stabilized again, but something inside me was no longer the same. I had learned to slow down, to breathe before acting, to respect the timing of things. Every nail, every plan review, every conversation with the team carried a different weight now. And it was in this more conscious pace that I realized how much I had neglected the essence of my work before. Restoring a historic building wasn't just about dealing with cement and brick. It was about dealing with memories, with stories that had stood the test of time. And somehow, that began to intertwine with my own journey. I was also trying to restore myself layer by layer, learning to deal with the internal cracks that until then I had hidden behind haste and arrogance. One late afternoon, Carlos called me in for a chat. It had been a while since that tense meeting that had changed everything. He greeted me with a discreet but sincere smile. "You've changed, Raphael," he said, "and not just as a professional, you've changed as a person. I see it in the way you carry yourself, in your attention to every detail." I remained silent, unsure of how to respond. He then added, "The mistake you made was serious, but what you did afterward was even more important." In that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Recognition. Not the kind of recognition that feeds the ego, but the kind that heals an old wound. That of feeling irrelevant. From that day on, I began to be assigned to smaller projects, but with more autonomy. Lucas included me in decision-making. Paula asked me for technical input. And even Anna joked that I was now the patience inspector. It seemed small, but to me, it was immense. I realized how each gesture was a way of saying, "We trust you again." And that's when I understood something fundamental. Trust isn't a prize you earn, it's a bond you build. And if I wanted to honor that, I needed to stay strong, even when the memories of the mistake came back to haunt me. Despite the progress, there was a day when everything seemed to fall apart again. During a routine inspection, a technical report was questioned by an external inspector, and the problem was once again blamed on me. At that moment, I felt that old, sinking feeling in my stomach, the same one I'd felt when I'd made the original mistake. Voices in the room rose, and glances grew heavy. Again, but this time, I took a deep breath and remained calm. I took the documents, reviewed them line by line, and discovered that the error stemmed from a typo in the system. I showed them, explained clearly, and the tension dissipated. Carlos looked at me, somewhat surprised, and simply said, "That's how it's done." It was a small moment, but for me, it was huge. I had proven to myself that I was no longer the same impulsive man I'd been before. That night, on my way home, I stopped in front of an old building along the way. I stared at the windows, the cracks, the marks of time. I thought about how structures, even damaged ones, could still hold beauty and meaning. That's how I saw myself now, scarred, but still standing. I understood that overcoming mistakes doesn't erase them, but transforms them into the foundation for something more solid. For the first time in a long time, I looked at myself with tenderness. Not as the man who failed, but as the man who had the courage to change. Over time, my attitude began to be reflected in my colleagues as well. The initial tension turned to respect, and gradually to admiration. I was no longer the impulsive employee, but someone who learned to listen, analyze, and consider. The team began to consult me before making important decisions, and I felt my voice carried weight, but now it wasn't out of arrogance, it was out of experience and responsibility. This change gave me a sense of purpose I'd never felt before. For the first time, I realized that my mistakes could serve as a warning and a learning experience for others, not just as a punishment for myself. Even with progress, the guilt never completely disappeared. There were still moments when I relived that cracking sound, that feeling of helplessness and shame, but I learned to transform those moments into strength. Each time the memory arose, I took a deep breath and recalled everything I did afterward. The effort to study, the effort to regain confidence, the careful repair of the damage. It was a way of honoring the mistake and making it useful, a reminder that failure can be the starting point for real and profound change. On the last major project I participated in, leading a smaller restoration, I realized I no longer needed to prove anything to anyone, not Carlos, not Lucas, not my colleagues. What mattered was my commitment to history, to the building, and to myself. When I finished, I looked at the work and felt a genuine silent pride. The sense of responsibility, well assumed, was far more valuable than any external recognition. There, I understood that true overcoming isn't about forgetting the past, but learning from it, and moving forward with greater awareness and determination. Today, when I think about that initial moment, the crack, the damaged wall, the despair I felt, I see that it was the biggest wake-up call of my life. If I had continued at the same pace, with haste and arrogance, I probably wouldn't be here telling my story. The mistake forced me to face my flaws, to listen, to observe, to rebuild myself with patience and dedication. I discovered that responsibility, humility, and perseverance are values learned through pain, but that sustain any future trajectory. By sharing this story, I want my readers to understand something simple yet profound. Mistakes don't define us, but how we react to them does. Today, I continue working, learning, and rebuilding not only historic buildings, but also my own history. I'm not perfect. I still carry scars. I still fear failure, but I've learned that overcoming obstacles is possible when we have the courage to face ourselves. My journey isn't over, but now I know I can finally walk with my head held high. From abandoned teenager to overcomer, the true story that changed my life forever. I never thought I'd feel fear in my own home. I grew up believing that coldness was normal, that constant pressure and a lack of affection were part of what family meant. My life before the turning point was a silent routine of submission and restraint, always attentive to the reactions of my mother, Sylvia, and my father, Rogerio, learning early on to measure every gesture and word so as not to provoke anger or disdain. Vacations, which should have been moments of rest, were, for my sister Bianca and me, merely periods of vigilance disguised as care. I remember how our small joys were constantly diminished, compared, or ignored. Any attempt to protest or question was met with veiled criticism or silent punishment. I learned to internalize the guilt and live with the emotional void, as if it were a natural part of life, never imagining that something different, lighter, more human could exist. This feeling of inadequacy turned into constant anxiety, gnawing at me from within and making every family interaction a daily challenge, almost a silent battle to simply exist without being crushed. It was difficult to even breathe without feeling like I was doing something wrong. My sister Bianca experienced this in a similar way, but her way of coping with her fear was to withdraw even further, hiding her emotions in layers of silence and obedience. Everything began to change at the most unexpected moment. A trip that, in theory, should have been fun, turned into a revealing nightmare. My parents put us in the car with the promise of a different kind of trip, but upon arriving at the hotel parking lot, I was simply left behind. They claimed it was to save money on Bianca's room, who deserved more comfort, while I was supposed to learn to be responsible. The feeling of abandonment was overwhelming. For the first time, I experienced firsthand what it meant to not be a priority for those who claimed to love me. Vulnerability turned into a mixture of anger, confusion, and profound sadness. I was alone, in the middle of an unfamiliar place, surrounded by cars and people going about their daily lives, oblivious to a lost teenager trying to understand what had happened. Every minute felt like an eternity, and in this forced isolation, I realized my reality had no protection whatsoever. My childhood experiences, small oversights, constant criticism, a lack of empathy, had prepared me to feel this abandonment without surprise. But even so, the pain was unprecedented, sharp, and difficult to contain. I began to realize that life as I knew it wasn't normal, that my parents' supposed care was a facade of control and disdain, and that perhaps the only way out was to seek help outside of what I called home. After this episode, I was taken in by a foster family who offered me something I hadn't even known existed: security. Donna Lucia and Mr. Antonio welcomed me with genuine kindness, smiles that concealed nothing, and words that conveyed true care. For the first time, I didn't have to hide my feelings or measure every gesture to avoid veiled punishment. The change was immediate, yet frightening at the same time. Being in a healthy environment brought back all the years of neglect and fear. Memories of screams, coldness, and abandonment flooded my mind, provoking a mixture of relief and pain. I realized that part of me was still bracing myself for rejection. At any moment, and dealing with this internal distrust was as difficult as facing my parents. It was during this time that I met Helena, the social worker responsible for my case, whose firmness and empathy gave me a sense of the possibility of justice and care. Gradually, with the support of my guardians and the constant monitoring of Child Protective Services, I began to understand that my life experience didn't define my worth, and that it was possible to rebuild something better. The process of emotional reconstruction began with small things: sincere conversations, structured schedules, shared meals without tension, and the ability to feel protected without fear. Meanwhile, the relationship with my parents continued to deteriorate. Sylvia insisted on discrediting me, claiming I was making up stories to get attention, while Rogerio tried to justify everything as a difference in upbringing. I remember the official meeting where tensions exploded. Sylvia lost control, attacked Rogerio, and in that moment, everything became clear. Not only had they failed to care for us, but they had cultivated an unstable and toxic environment, incapable of providing any form of genuine affection. Witnessing this instability left me feeling a mixture of relief and sadness. Relief at finally understanding the gravity of the situation, sadness for everything we had already been through. It was also a crucial turning point because, at that moment, it became impossible to deny that permanent guardianship was necessary. I needed to escape that reality, to survive emotionally. This revelation brought a tremendous weight, but also a newfound hope. For the first time, I realized I deserved better, and that there were adults willing to consistently protect me. The transition was slow, but each day I felt my own worth emerging from within the chaos that had been my childhood. Little by little, I began to notice significant internal changes. Living with my new family taught me empathy, patience, and unconditional love. My sense of security, once constantly threatened, began to strengthen. Over time, I was able to look at my own life and understand that the abuse I had suffered was not my fault, nor an indication of weakness. I began to set small goals, to study without fear of criticism, to establish friendships without fear of rejection, to express my opinions without feeling guilty. Each small achievement was a silent victory against years of neglect and abandonment. At the same time, I witnessed the transformation of my sister Bianca, who found the courage to report abuse and seek her own protection. Seeing this change in her gave me a sense of purpose, to fight not only for myself, but for her, ensuring that neither of us would suffer again. I still felt old pain and fears, but the presence of trusted adults and a loving environment began to create roots of resilience within me. The idea of the future, once a distant concept, began to become tangible. At first, dealing with old traumas was almost like breathing water. Every effort to move forward felt suffocating. Sometimes I woke in the middle of the night feeling the fear that at any moment something bad would happen, like in the old days when any scream or silence in my parents' house could mean punishment or disapproval. It was difficult to separate the past from the present. Even surrounded by affection, my body and mind reacted as if they were still on the front lines of an emotional battlefield. I caught myself in small moments, hesitating before laughing or expressing myself as if I needed to measure every gesture to ensure no one would be disappointed. Each step forward was accompanied by an internal battle between the trust I wanted to build and the distrust ingrained by years of neglect. But the persistence of Donna Lucia and Seu Antonio, the consistency of Helena, and the support of Marcia, my school counselor, began to create cracks in this fear. I learned that transformation didn't happen magically, but through small daily interactions that taught me my worth wasn't dependent on my parents' judgment. Gradually, These small emotional victories accumulated, and a sense of control over my own life began to emerge, something I had never experienced before. Reconnecting with my sister Bianca was another delicate step. For years, she and I had been silent accomplices in a cycle of fear and submission. When she finally found the courage to report the abuse, we sat together for the first time, without having to protect ourselves or hide what we felt. Talking about our fears, our pain, and our frustrations was liberating, albeit painful. Bianca possessed a hidden strength, a courage that I was still learning to recognize in myself. Together, we began to realize that we were capable of planning a life not determined by our parents' neglect. The presence of Rafaela, Bianca's friend, as a witness and support, brought greater security and reinforced the feeling that we were not alone. These new, strengthened bonds were fundamental to rebuilding our trust in the world and the people around us. With each open conversation, each act of care, fear began to fade, giving way to a cautious but firm hope. At the same time, I faced the challenge of reconciling with my own identity and feelings. For years, I had repressed my sensitivity, believing that showing emotion was a risk. Now, I realized that my tears, my questions, and my vulnerabilities were not weaknesses, but signs of humanity. I began writing about my experiences, first for myself, then sharing them in small support groups, and this expression became a form of therapy. Putting words to confusing feelings helped organize my mind and transform pain into learning. Each account I wrote strengthened my voice, my sense of worth, and the realization that my experiences could help others in similar situations. It was in this process that I realized that overcoming didn't mean forgetting, but integrating the past into my story so that it no longer controlled my present. Writing became my bridge to the future, a tool of resilience that I could carry with me forever. Despite the progress, there were moments of regression, moments when fear returned with a vengeance. Memories of my parents' indifference, their cruel comments, and their tortuous justifications haunted me. At these times, I felt like giving up, isolating myself again, believing the world still had no place for me. But looking at my new family and my sister, I realized that giving up was not an option. Their every gesture of care, every smile, and every word of encouragement served as a constant reminder that life could be different. I learned to identify these triggers and face them, to name my feelings, and to seek support when memories of the past threatened to overwhelm me. Overcoming, I understood, was not linear. It required patience, courage, and emotional discipline. Learning to protect myself emotionally without completely shutting myself down became a daily exercise, and each small victory motivated me to continue, to resist, to believe that I deserved a better future. It was during this period that I discovered the power of planning my future. Before, any idea of planning was just a fantasy, because my life was under the control of others. Now, I could dream and set real goals, study with focus, prepare for high school, and eventually enter university, support my sister and ensure her safety, build relationships based on trust and respect. Each goal, no matter how small, became a milestone of independence and resilience. The feeling of being in control of my own story was unprecedented, and with it came a confidence I never imagined I possessed. I realized that overcoming wasn't just about moving away from the pain, but transforming that pain into motivation to create something better. What seemed impossible became gradual, and steady progress showed me that my life wouldn't be defined by abandonment and abuse, but by the courage to rebuild it with love, care, and purpose. Over time, I realized that overcoming wasn't just about me, but also about the small daily achievements that showed me I could trust the world again. Waking up without feeling immediately afraid, being able to laugh without feeling guilty, establishing sincere friendships, and feeling that my opinions were valued were silent but powerful victories. Each daily routine, from leisurely breakfasts with Donna Lucia to bedtime conversations with So Antonio, represented a step toward rebuilding my self-esteem. I learned to observe my feelings without judging them, to identify when old fears were trying to control me, and to react consciously, choosing not to let the past dominate me. This realization was crucial. Finally, I understood that the pain I carried no longer needed to define who I was. Every gesture of care I received, every word of encouragement, helped reshape my view of the world and what is possible when one has real support. It was as if I was learning to walk again, but this time on solid ground, with an invisible yet reliable safety net that allowed me to explore, take risks, and grow. The feeling of emotional freedom, even though accompanied by scars, began to consolidate, showing that overcoming did not mean forgetting, but learning to live despite the pain. My sister Bianca became a fundamental partner in this process. Seeing her transformation from a withdrawn and scared girl to a young woman finding the strength to assert herself and seek justice inspired me daily. We shared fears, achievements, small victories, and even frustrations, building a bond based on empathy and mutual care. Rafaela's support was also essential, showing us that trusted external connections could be as important as blood ties. Together, we were learning that true family isn't limited to biology, but to the protection, affection, and loyalty one chooses to offer. This understanding transformed our relationship with the past. Instead of dwelling on pain and guilt, we began to plan concrete actions to ensure our safety and well-being. Each step in this direction reinforced my determination not to allow past experiences to define me, but rather to become the foundation for building something solid, healthy, and resilient. As I worked to solidify my sense of self-worth and security, I faced new social and academic challenges. School, once a neutral environment, became a space for learning and connection, but also for exposing my vulnerabilities. Dealing with peers, dealing with teachers, and trusting adults outside my foster family required daily courage. There were times when I felt intimidated, times when memories of my childhood made me question my ability to belong. But each challenge I faced, each small success, increased my confidence. I realized that overcoming the past wasn't just emotional, but also social. Learning to position myself, express myself, and build healthy relationships was part of rebuilding who I was. The feeling of being able to contribute to my own story, not just react to it, was liberating. It was a slow but profound transformation that solidified the idea that life could be lived fully, even with scars. My relationship with my parents remained distant, but now with a different perspective. I learned to recognize that I couldn't change the past, and that their responsibility for the damage caused couldn't be reversed by my actions. This understanding brought relief and control. I was no longer a helpless victim, but someone who acknowledged their experiences and sought reconstruction with tools and appropriate support. During supervised meetings, I was able to maintain my composure, even in the face of attempts to provoke or devalue me. This posture didn't mean an absence of pain, but a newfound strength to deal with adverse situations without them paralyzing me. Learning to set clear boundaries and prioritize my emotional health became fundamental to my self-esteem and to protecting my sister. Each time I managed to remain calm, express my opinions, or protect myself from manipulation, I felt the path of overcoming challenges solidify, laying the foundation for an independent and emotionally healthy life. The most defining moment of this period of reconstruction was realizing that my future depended on me. For the first time, I could dream without fear, set goals, and feel genuine hope. planning my studies, considering my career, strengthening family and social ties, supporting Bianca, and cultivating true friendships became part of my daily life. The feeling of autonomy was accompanied by responsibility, but also by pride. I understood that overcoming wasn't about erasing the pain, but learning to transform it into motivation to build something better. Each challenge overcome, each achievement, however small, was a testament to resilience and inner strength. I felt capable of facing the world with courage, confidence, and a sense of self-worth that had previously been lacking. This realization cemented the certainty that life could be rebuilt, that the past didn't need to determine the future, and that I had the right to be happy, protected, and respected. Even with all the progress, there were times when the past seemed to pull me back, almost suffocating me. Some days were like opening an old wound that wouldn't heal. Small triggers, unexpected. In comments or memories made me relive my parents' abandonment and coldness. At these times, anxiety tightened my chest, and the feeling of helplessness returned with a vengeance. But unlike the past, now I was not alone. Donna Lucia, So Antonio, and Helena became essential pillars, offering not only guidance, but examples of patience, empathy, and consistency. With them, I learned to name my fears, to understand that my emotions were valid and that I had the right to react and protect myself. I discovered that true strength was not the absence of pain, but the ability to acknowledge it, face it, and still move forward. Each day that I managed to deal with painful memories without paralyzing myself was a silent but profound victory, strengthening my sense of worth and my confidence in life. Gradually, what once seemed like a permanent shadow began to lose intensity, allowing the light of new experiences, healthy relationships, and opportunities to become visible and concrete. A defining moment came when I attended a school meeting with Marcia and other professionals, addressing not only my academic needs, but also my emotional well-being. For the first time, I felt genuinely heard, with respect and consideration. This experience showed me that my voice carried weight, that my experiences were not invisible, and that I could actively participate in shaping my future. The feeling of being able to speak up, be understood, and make decisions about my own life was unprecedented and transformative. I remember looking at Bianca and seeing in her eyes the same hope I felt growing within me. Together, we were learning that the past didn't have to define us, and that every choice we made now could be a victory over years of abuse and abandonment. This realization brought a sense of freedom I never imagined possible and empowered me to face the challenges ahead with greater confidence and determination. As I progressed, I began to take on responsibilities that previously seemed impossible. Planning my studies, organizing my time, and dealing with the demands of daily life without constant fear was a silent but impactful achievement. Each challenge I resolved showed me that I could trust myself, that my decisions had value, and that I didn't need to depend on approval or fear to act. Bianca also grew in this process, finding the courage to express herself, take a stand, and participate in her own reconstruction. Together, we began to create a routine of mutual support, based on respect, communication, and trust, something we completely lacked as children. This delicate balance between autonomy and support was essential to strengthening our resilience and preparing us for future stages in life, demonstrating that overcoming challenges involves not only facing the past, but also building a solid and secure present. My relationship with my parents became a constant point of reflection. I learned that I couldn't expect them to change, nor could I justify abusive or neglectful behavior. Recognizing that they wouldn't be able to provide what I needed was painful but liberating. This awareness allowed me to set clear boundaries and focus on what truly mattered: my safety, my well-being, and caring for my sister. Setting boundaries wasn't just about protection, it was also about affirming my own dignity and worth. Each time I maintained this approach, I felt my confidence grow and my sense of autonomy solidify. The pain didn't disappear completely, but its influence on my life diminished, making room for conscious decisions, real dreams, and actions that strengthened my resilience. The definitive turning point came when I realized that despite all the scars, I could live without constant fear, without the feeling of helplessness. It was as if an invisible curtain had been lifted from my eyes, allowing me to see possibilities previously blocked by trauma. Feeling that I could build healthy relationships, set concrete goals, and protect my sister was transformative. I still carried painful memories, but they no longer defined me. The feeling of control over my own story, of emotional freedom, and of hope for the future solidified my self-confidence. For the first time, I felt that life could be lived with ease, even if scars remained. Overcoming grief ceased to be just a distant goal and became a daily practice, a way of living that combined care, courage, and self-love. Over time, I realized that rebuilding my life wasn't a single act, but a series of daily choices. Each decision to protect myself, prioritize my well-being, and support my sister became a silent victory. Donna Lucia and Seu Antonio remained my foundation, offering non-judgmental care and allowing me to discover my limits and capabilities. The previously non-existent sense of security grew stronger with each passing day, showing me that I could live without constant fear. The constant support of Helena, Marcia, and professionals who understood my past reinforced the idea that life could be different, that trustworthy adults existed, and that I was entitled to protection, love, and respect. This framework allowed me to begin to see the future not just as a possibility, but as something to be actively built, with conscious choices and responsibility for my own story. With each small achievement, my sense of worth grew, and the pain of the past, though still present, ceased to dominate. Bianca became a symbol of our transformation. Seeing her courage grow, her ability to stand up and fight for justice, even in the face of traumas similar to mine, filled me with pride and hope. She learned to trust herself and the adults who supported us, and together we discovered that our relationship could be one of partnership and complicity rather than fear and submission. Each step she took to free herself from the cycle of abuse strengthened us and showed me that overcoming grief is a collective process based on mutual support and trust. The feeling of being able to face the world together, of building a safe emotional home, and of caring for each other cemented the certainty that true family goes beyond blood ties, being defined by love, care, and respect. Life began to take on colors I hadn't even realized existed. School stopped being a place of fear and became a place of learning, where my ideas and opinions were valued. Achieving small goals, receiving recognition for my effort and dedication, and seeing my potential recognized by others was transformative. Each academic achievement, each moment of healthy interaction with peers and teachers increased my confidence and strengthened my sense of belonging. I learned that overcoming trauma doesn't mean erasing painful memories, but integrating these experiences into my story so that they become a source of learning and motivation. This realization changed the way I viewed my own life. I was no longer defined by my parents' neglect, but by the choices I made daily to grow, learn, and care for myself and my sister. With this new perspective, I realized that emotional freedom and autonomy were achievements that needed to be constantly cultivated. Every decision I made, every moment I managed to deal with feelings of insecurity or fear without letting them overwhelm me, strengthened my resilience. Practicing empathy, open communication with my sister, and the ongoing support of my foster family showed me that it was possible to live a healthy life, even after years of trauma. I understood that overcoming adversity isn't linear. There are ups and downs, moments of fragility and fear, but the awareness that we can choose how we react to these situations makes all the difference. This skill became a fundamental tool for planning for the future and ensuring we don't repeat harmful patterns. My name is Tiago, and today I look back and see a journey marked by pain, abandonment, and neglect, but also by courage, resilience, and transformation. Bianca and I learned that overcoming doesn't mean forgetting, but growing despite the pain. Our experiences taught us the importance of choosing who will be in our lives, of setting clear boundaries, of caring for ourselves, and of supporting each other. I learned that true family is one that offers security, love, and consistency, not just blood ties. Every step I took to rebuild my life, every moment of trust and hope, cemented the certainty that, even in the face of the greatest difficulties, it is possible to overcome, to create roots of happiness, and to plan a future that makes sense. Overcoming is a daily practice, a conscious choice to live with courage, love, and purpose.
After my daughter's wedding, I discovered the woman I always tried to hide inside me. I remember that day with a clarity that almost frightens me. My heart was racing, a mixture of anxiety and joy that seemed impossible to contain. It was my daughter Isabella's wedding, and emotion washed over me like waves in a restless sea. She was stunning, walking with light steps, her smile lighting up her face as if the whole world had conspired in her favor. While everyone around me was dazzled, I felt the weight of all the years I had lived, the sleepless nights, the doubts that haunted me. Motherhood had shaped me, but now, seeing her ready to embark on her own journey, I realized I needed to face who I was beyond her mother. Every memory surfaced, every defeat, every fear overcome. What remained for me, after all, was to learn to live for myself, without the shadow of guilt or perfection. I needed to reconnect with Helena, the woman I had been before I lost myself to the demands of the world and my heart. The venue chosen for the ceremony reflected my own anxiety. The old mansion in the city center, with candlelit stone walls and crystal chandeliers. Everything seemed magical, but also intimidating. Every detail, from the flower arrangements to the sound of the piano, echoed within me as a reminder that everything needed to be impeccable. I felt my thoughts swirling, old memories resurfacing, memories of difficult times when I had to be strong while the world seemed to fall apart. Every smile around me made me feel even more fragile. But at the same time, there was beauty in it all. A contrast that reminded me that life could be hard, but also generous, if we knew how to see it. As Isabella got ready, laughing with her friends and adjusting her veil, I realized how quickly time had passed. She was no longer the little girl who followed me through the hallways of my house, asking for a hug or protection. Now, she was an independent, confident woman, ready to create her own story. And I, in turn, needed to come to terms with the fact that my role had changed. I would still be a mother, but not the same mother who had shouldered every responsibility. I needed to learn to be Helena, the woman behind the story, with her pains and victories, fears and achievements. Looking at my daughter made me feel proud, but also afraid. Afraid of not being up to the freedom that now awaited her. The music began to play, announcing the bride's entrance. My heart raced, and a mixture of joy and nostalgia washed over me. Isabella's every step reminded me of all the moments that shaped her life and mine. I needed to be present, fully present, but not just a spectator. I needed to feel, to recognize the woman she had become, and at the same time, the strength I still carried. It was at that moment that I realized that overcoming wasn't just about my past actions, but about the ability to remain standing, despite the wounds. Life tests us, and in that moment, I understood that being a mother isn't synonymous with perfection, but with true presence. When she reached the altar, my heart filled with emotion. The ceremony wasn't just about Isabella. It was also about me, about the woman who survived the storms and still found the courage to celebrate. Her happiness mingled with mine, but it didn't overwhelm me. On the contrary, it reminded me that I could still live my own story, without fear, without rushing. The future appeared like a blank book, and for the first time in a long time, I felt the urge to write each page with my own colors. Motherhood had shaped me, but life still had chapters reserved for Helena. In the days following the celebration, the house felt strangely large and silent. The echo of laughter and conversation that once filled every corner had faded, leaving an almost palpable space. Each room recalled shared moments, small routines that now no longer existed. I drank coffee alone, looked at the empty chair in front of me, and felt the weight of what we call absence. It was a silence that hurt not only because of the physical emptiness, but because it forced me to face Helena head-on. I realized that for years, my identity had been shaped almost exclusively by motherhood, and now I needed to learn to exist without that filter. Every daily movement seemed to bring up old memories, sleepless nights, difficult decisions, moments of fear and courage. I discovered that what had once protected me, the routine of a devoted mother, was now the mirror that showed me how much I had neglected myself. And it was in this silence that Helena began to recognize herself, without needing to compare herself, without needing to justify her own existence. Walking became my refuge. Each morning, the sun seemed to invite me to leave the house and wander streets that had previously gone unnoticed. The smell of fresh bread from the corner bakery, the distant sound of children running through the park, the hurried footsteps of people coming and going. Everything felt new, as if I were seeing the world through eyes I hadn't seen in a long time. I learned to listen to the wind, to notice simple details, to feel alive without having to carry a weight on my shoulders. Each step was a silent reminder that I could still choose how to spend my time, how to shape my emotions, and that freedom didn't have to be scary. I began to understand that life could be lived fully even without major events, simply by observing and feeling. The silence of the house contrasted with this discovery, and I felt I was finally relearning how to exist for myself. On a rainy afternoon, I opened the drawer where I kept old notebooks. Yellowed papers, crooked letters, and forgotten poems stared back at me, reminding me that Helena had always existed before motherhood took over every decision. Leafing through those pages was like revisiting a part of myself I'd left behind, a version of myself that dreamed without fear, wrote without pressure, and believed that life could still be surprising. I felt an intense emotion, a mixture of nostalgia and hope. I decided to write again, allowing the words to flow without haste or judgment. Each written sentence brought back a strength I hadn't realized I had, an ancient courage hidden between the lines and paragraphs. Writing became an exercise in reconnecting with myself, a way to reconstruct Helena in every word, in every feeling I dared to put on paper. One day, I decided to walk to the city's central square. I always passed by it, but never entered the art studio located next door. This time, something compelled me to walk through the door. The smell of paint, wood, and coffee immediately welcomed me. I was greeted by Estella, the owner of the space, a woman with a wide smile who invited me to participate in a Saturday painting workshop. I accepted without a second thought. As I picked up my brushes, I felt a sweet nervousness mixed with an old excitement. Painting became a silent dialogue between my emotions and the colors I spread across the canvas. Each stain and mixture was a confession I couldn't verbalize. And, little by little, I realized that the studio was not just a place for art, but a space for healing, where I could reconnect with the Helena who had been forgotten amidst memories and responsibilities. As Estella and I chatted during class, I noticed that my social life, which had long been limited to motherhood, was beginning to expand again. Between brushstrokes and laughter, shared stories, advice, and venting about losses and reunions emerged. I discovered the power of friendship and genuine support, without pressure or judgment. Each encounter with Estella reminded me that I didn't need to carry the whole world on my shoulders, that there was room for joy, lightness, and spontaneity. I began to find pleasure in the little things, like walking aimlessly, watching the sunset, or simply writing in my notebook. Little by little, loneliness stopped being just absence and became an opportunity for self-discovery. Helena was rediscovering herself, learning that life could be lived from the inside out, and that true strength lies not in carrying everything alone, but in allowing oneself to exist authentically. It was during a sunny afternoon in the central square that I met Miguel. He carried an old-fashioned camera, as if he'd stepped out of another era, and walked around observing every detail around him, capturing moments that would go unnoticed by most. When our eyes met, there was a moment of silent recognition. as if each of us felt the other's presence without needing words. He asked me if he could photograph the light reflecting off leaves wet from the morning rain. I accepted, surprised by the naturalness of his presence. Watching me paint and photograph, I felt something new. Someone who saw beyond appearances, who could perceive the essence of what I felt, without questioning, without rushing, simply accepting. That simplicity touched me deeply, bringing a kind of comfort I hadn't remembered existed. Over time, Miguel began to frequent the square at the same times as me, always silent, always attentive. Short conversations about photography turned into long exchanges about life, art, and forgotten dreams. He told stories of places he'd visited, people he'd met, and moments that had shaped his life, and I, in turn, opened my heart, talking about the pain, losses, and lessons life had taught me. There was a complicity that grew slowly, unhurriedly, without demands. I began to realize I could trust him, that I didn't have to carry my emotions alone, that the presence of someone attentive and sincere could be a balm for my weary heart. Miguel didn't come to replace anyone, but to remind me that there was still room for new connections. One day, he invited me for a walk to the nearby river. We walked side by side, talking about photography, painting, and the beauty of capturing life's small moments. With each step, I felt something inside me stirring, a mixture of curiosity, joy, and serenity I hadn't felt in a long time. When we stopped to observe the reflections of the trees in the water, Miguel said, "Sometimes life gives us the chance to see things from a different angle, and that's when everything changes." I remained silent, absorbing his message. That was exactly how I felt, ready to change, to look at myself more lovingly, without judgment, without fear of starting over. For the first time in a long time, I took a deep breath and realized I was truly alive. Another afternoon, we went to Estella's studio together, painting side by side. Miguel observed my brush strokes, commenting on colors, textures, and sensations, and I realized he saw beyond the surface, perceiving what I was trying to express without words. What began as a discreet presence became a comforting companion, an exchange of energy that made me feel lighter. His every smile, every gesture of attention reminded me that life could still be beautiful, even after so much loss and challenge. And I finally realized the world didn't have to be faced alone. There was room to open up, trust, and allow yourself to feel again. As the weeks passed, Miguel and I developed a silent yet meaningful routine. We walked, photographed, painted, and, above all, learned to listen to each other without rushing. He didn't arrive with promises or expectations. He was simply present, offering companionship and understanding. Gradually, I realized that my solitude was no longer a void, but an opportunity for conscious connection. Miguel's presence taught me that life could be lived with ease, that the most valuable bonds emerge when authenticity prevails. Helena began to transform from the inside out, rediscovering the courage to open herself to the world without fear, ready to feel and live fully, with her own colors and intensity. As time passed, my meetings with Miguel ceased to be mere moments of distraction and became small journeys of self-discovery. Every conversation, every attentive gesture, made me realize nuances of myself that had long been dormant. The life I had led before, so full of commitments and responsibilities, seemed distant, almost like a forgotten dream. He didn't judge my choices or pressure me to be different. He was simply there, patient and present. And this, silently, began to transform the way I saw myself. For the first time, I felt I could be vulnerable without losing my strength, that I could show my imperfections without fear of rejection. Every shared smile, every lingering look, reminded me that life could still be light, even after so many challenges. On a cold afternoon, we walked through nearly deserted streets covered in dry leaves. The wind blew gently, as if guiding us slowly. Miguel held my hand naturally, and I felt a wave of emotion course through me. It wasn't just a physical gesture, but symbolic. It was trust. It was complicity. It was the realization that we didn't need words to connect. I felt my heart warm with that closeness, realizing I was learning to surrender gradually, without fear of losing myself. The sensation was strange and at the same time comforting, as if I were returning to a place within myself that had been forgotten. It was there, in that moment, that I realized that the courage to open up is also the courage to allow yourself to truly feel. Little by little, I began sharing more of my routine, my thoughts, and even small fears I'd kept to myself. Miguel listened attentively, without interruptions, without judgment. There was a gentleness in his presence that made me feel safe. I discovered I could laugh at myself again, that I could cry when necessary, and that every expression was met with understanding. That gradual openness taught me not to fear my own feelings, to accept them as part of who I am. And all the while, I realized my relationship with Isabella was also strengthening. By allowing myself to live and feel authentically, I was showing her that strength lies not in hiding one's weaknesses, but in integrating them into one's life. One Sunday, we decided to explore a small bookstore downtown. Among shelves of old books and the smell of yellowed pages, we talked about dreams, memories, and what happiness meant to each of us. Miguel commented on the importance of recognizing small achievements and realizing that life is built in the details. That struck me deeply. I realized that my victories didn't have to be grand to be valuable. Every day I was able to be true to myself. Every choice I made with awareness and courage was a victory. His presence helped me realize that emotional reconstruction wasn't a one-time event, but an ongoing process, made of small moments that, together, create a full life. As evening fell, we sat in a cafe near the bookstore. The yellow lights reflected off our hands on the table, and the sense of intimacy was almost palpable. Miguel smiled and said, "You have incredible strength," even without realizing it. That sentence resonated within me as a reminder of everything I'd experienced and overcome. For the first time in a long time, I felt I didn't need to carry my past as a burden, that I could simply exist, whole and imperfect, yet valuable. Helena was finally recognizing herself, learning to trust love, people, and above all, herself. Every step I took with Miguel was a step toward freedom, a step that reaffirmed my ability to start over and live authentically and intensely. The following days brought a sense of lightness I hadn't felt in years. Helena began to perceive herself as a whole person, capable of living without submitting to other people's expectations. Each morning, as she opened the window and felt the sun touch her face, she realized she no longer needed to carry the rush to be perfect, nor the weight of guilt for moments gone by. Isabella, increasingly confident and happy, became a reflection of the strength I always wanted to pass on to her. Not unattainable perfection, but the courage to face life with authenticity. I felt proud observing her independence, her genuine joy, and realized that the greatest legacy she could leave was not advice, but examples of resilience, courage, and self-love. My relationship with Miguel deepened naturally. He demanded nothing more than my presence, and this taught me more than any previous experience. That love and true connection flourish when there's no rush, when space is allowed for the other to fully exist. Walks around the city, afternoons in the studio, moments of shared silence. Each instant was proof that life could be both light and intense at the same time. For the first time, I felt I didn't need to fear vulnerability. On the contrary, it strengthened me, making me more aware of my own essence. Helena was growing not only as a mother, but as a woman capable of reinventing herself, of opening herself to life without fear. 1. Late afternoon, sitting on a park bench, I watched Isabella chatting with friends, laughing without a care in the world. A deep feeling of gratitude overcame me, for everything I've experienced, for all the falls and ups and downs, and for finally being able to celebrate who we are without rushing. Her every smile, every gesture of self-confidence, reminded me that the cycle of life continues, and that my role now was no longer to protect, but to support and inspire by example. Helena felt whole, her heart light and open, able to realize that true happiness lies in embracing one's own journey and living authentically. Upon returning home, I found Miguel waiting, camera in hand, ready to capture a sunset that looked magnificent. We walked together to the terrace, watching the golden light bathe the city. He smiled and said, "Life has these unexpected colors, doesn't it?" I smiled back, realizing that, yes, life had surprised me, not with perfection, but with opportunities to reconnect, with myself and the people I chose to be around. Helena felt a warmth in her chest, a serene certainty that every step taken so far, every difficulty faced, had been worth it. Overcoming adversity isn't a one-time event. It's the sum of small victories, conscious decisions, and the courage to reinvent oneself at every moment. That night, as I fell asleep, I thought of Isabella, Miguel, and myself. I felt a peace I hadn't experienced in a long time. Helena finally understood that she didn't need to be perfect to deserve happiness. What mattered was authenticity, the courage to always start over, and the ability to transform pain into strength. Every challenge faced, every tear shed, every moment of doubt had been part of building a stronger, more resilient, and vibrant woman. Life would continue to bring ups and downs, but now I was ready to embrace each moment with an open heart, aware that the greatest gift we can give ourselves is the freedom to be fully ourselves.
From lost student to master of my own path, my journey of courage and overcoming. When I look back, I realize how certain phases of life silently shape us. Sometimes what we call failure is simply fate's way of repositioning us. Back then, I didn't have that clarity. All I saw was the fall, the emptiness, and the feeling that the ground had disappeared beneath my feet. I remember waking up every day with a heavy head, trying to pretend I was okay, even when the mirror said otherwise. The people around me seemed to be moving forward, and I felt stuck. Not for lack of will, but because I didn't know where else to go. It was in this space of uncertainty that I began to find myself, albeit slowly, stumbling over my own limitations. Back then, I believed success was a straight line, something achieved with effort and discipline, like a graph that only goes up. But life taught me that it doesn't work that way. There are curves, detours, pauses, and it was during one of those pauses that everything began to change. I was in my last semester of college, dealing with the weight of expectations, my own and others. The final project was what would define my future, and I wanted to prove myself. I worked all night, giving up rest and simple moments, thinking that dedication would be enough to earn recognition. But the result wasn't what I expected, and that failed message hit me like a punch. My first reaction was silence. I simply couldn't speak. I felt as if all my effort had been erased in seconds. I saw colleagues being praised while I was just trying to hide the lump in my throat. Pride prevented me from admitting the pain, so I smiled. But inside, there was chaos no one could have imagined. I began to doubt my talent, my ability, and even myself. The mind is treacherous in these moments. It makes us believe that one mistake defines who we are. It took me a while to understand that failure is actually just a crude form of learning, and that behind every no, there's a silent invitation to start over. For weeks, I avoided talking about it. I distanced myself from friends, turned off notifications, and sank into a kind of solitude that, while painful, was necessary. Deep down, I knew I couldn't continue in that state, but I also didn't have the energy to react. Then something simple happened, an unexpected conversation with a professor who always watched me from afar. He said just one sentence, "Arthur, sometimes the right path reveals itself when the plan goes wrong." That echoed in my head. Maybe he was right. Maybe the failure wasn't the end, but the beginning of a turning point I couldn't yet see. Over time, I revisited the project, not with the same desperation as before, but with a new perspective. I stopped trying to prove something and began to understand what I truly wanted to create. It was liberating to realize that the value of what we do lies not only in the result, but in the intention we put into each gesture. I rewrote everything unhurriedly, allowing myself to make mistakes, adjust, and start over as many times as necessary. In that process, I realized I was rebuilding more than just a work. I was rebuilding myself. Gradually, I realized that what we call failure is merely a reflection of what we haven't yet learned about ourselves. It was during this time of silence that I began to look within more honestly. It wasn't easy to face my own weaknesses, to recognize that I had followed a path more out of fear than choice. Engineering, which had previously seemed like a solid destiny, began to reveal itself as a form of armor. I used that course to protect myself from doubt, uncertainty, and above all, the possibility of self-disappointment. When I stopped hiding behind this facade, I understood that I no longer wanted to be the Arthur who pleased everyone. I wanted to discover who I truly was. It was at that moment that the weight of family expectations fell upon me with full force. My father was always a logical, straightforward man who believed that life is built in straight lines. He grew up hearing that stability was synonymous with success, and he instilled this in me from an early age. When I decided to drop out of college, he didn't understand. There was no argument, but his silence spoke louder than any words. My mother tried to mediate, but I could see the fear in her eyes. Fear of seeing me fail. Fear that I would lose my way. And deep down, I was afraid too. Only it was a different fear, that of spending my entire life being someone I wasn't. The first month away from college was a mixture of relief and panic. Relief at having breathed outside that bubble of pressure, and panic at not knowing what would come next. I woke without an alarm clock, but also without purpose. The hours passed slowly, and the silence of the room seemed to swallow me. Then, one random night, rummaging through old things, I found a box of electronic components from my teenage years. They were leftovers from projects I'd assembled for fun, when curiosity was my only motivation. That sparked something. I set up a small makeshift workbench and started experimenting again, without any pretense. And curiously, that simple gesture rekindled a part of me that had been dormant. As the weeks passed, that hobby became a kind of refuge. I began studying on my own, immersing myself in videos, forums, books, and technical articles. What had previously been just curiosity began to transform into passion. I realized that learning could be enjoyable when it made sense to me. It was a new feeling. I studied out of desire, not obligation. And it was through this process that I began developing small projects and posting them online. Without pretense, without trying to prove anything, just sharing what made me feel good. When the first positive comments arrived, it was like a breath of fresh air after so long stuck underwater. These small encouragements gave me strength. With each message from someone saying they liked what I was doing, a part of my self-confidence returned. It was at that point that I understood something essential. The most important recognition doesn't come from others, it comes from within. When we reconnect with what we love, the rest falls into place over time. I still didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in years, I felt no rush. I just wanted to keep learning, building, and above all, allowing myself to be imperfect. Because it was precisely through mistakes, pauses, and doubts that I began to understand the true meaning of moving forward. Over time, what began as a distraction became a new purpose. I began accepting small repair and automation jobs, things I learned by doing. I created a profile on a freelance platform, even though I didn't really believe anyone would be interested. At first, there were few orders, often low-paying, but each delivery was a personal victory. It was as if, with each project, I regained a piece of my self-esteem. I found myself learning not only about electronics and design, but also about responsibility, patience, and confidence. I realized that the freedom I so desperately sought came with a burden, the burden of choice. And for the first time, that burden didn't scare me. Still, not everything was a success. There were days when fear returned, disguised as doubt. I wondered if I was deluding myself, if my choice had been courageous or simply reckless. With each new bill that arrived, reality knocked on the door, and I found myself caught between dream and necessity. My parents, especially my father, continued to wait for the moment when I would return to college. Sometimes I almost gave in. I even opened the university website more than once, but always stopped at the same screen, confirm enrollment, and I simply couldn't click. Something inside me screamed that going back would be a betrayal of everything I had endured to get there. It was amidst this mix of uncertainty that a new opportunity arose. One of my projects caught the attention of an engineer at a startup looking for creative ideas for rapid prototyping. He sent me a message praising my work and asking if I'd be willing to participate in a test project. I remember reading and rereading that email over and over, trying to believe it was real. I agreed, even though I didn't have enough experience. I spent entire nights studying and testing. They were exhausting, but also exciting. Days. When I finished the prototype and submitted the report, I felt butterflies in my stomach that mixed fear and hope. A few days later, he responded with a phrase I've never forgotten. "You have talent, Arthur. Keep going." That message changed everything. It wasn't just a compliment, it was a sign, a reminder that perhaps I really was on the right path. From there, things began to take shape. Other jobs appeared, new connections formed, and little by little, my name began to circulate among people I admired. It wasn't stability yet, but it was growth, and more than that, it was belonging. For the first time, I felt like I was part of something that truly represented me. It wasn't about status, nor about proving anything. It was about finding meaning in what I was doing with my own hands. But even with the progress, my relationship with my father remained difficult. He couldn't see the value in what I was doing. He thought I was wasting my time and talent. Every conversation ended with a "you can still come back in time," and I silently swallowed the lump in my throat. I didn't blame him. He was just repeating what he'd learned all his life. But it hurt. It hurt to see that, even giving it my all, it still wasn't enough in his eyes. And it was, at that point, that I understood one of the hardest lessons of adulthood. Sometimes, growing up is accepting that not everyone will understand your path, and still keeping going. It was during this period that I had the idea to create something of my own. I knew there were other talented young people like me who lacked opportunities. I decided to develop a platform that connected small freelance engineers and technicians with companies looking for quick and creative solutions. At first, the idea seemed almost impossible. No team, no investment, and little business experience. But I had something valuable, a desire to learn and the courage to try. I started sketching ideas, studying programming, design, and marketing. Every night turned into dawn. Every mistake turned into a learning experience. For the first time, I felt my efforts had a purpose greater than myself. The following months were exhausting. I woke up early, studied during the day, and tested the platform's features at night. I did everything myself: layout, registration, integration with companies. There were dozens of failures, sleepless nights, and constant doubts. But unlike the Arthur before, I didn't give up. Each obstacle was a lesson. When the first version of the app was ready, I looked at the screen and felt tears well up. Not because it was perfect, but because that project reflected my entire journey. Failures, persistence, authenticity. For the first time, I was putting something into the world that carried my essence. I launched the app without any investment, using only social media to promote my story and the platform's proposal. The response exceeded all expectations. Within days, the first professionals began signing up, and companies showed interest in the solutions. It was small, but real. For the first time, my father called me without mentioning college. He had heard about the project and said, in a subdued voice, "Congratulations, son. I'm proud." They were few words, but they carried more weight than any compliment I had ever received. I cried with gratitude, understanding that this recognition was the beginning of a reconciliation with myself and with him. As the platform grew, new challenges arose. I needed to learn about finance, marketing, management, and contracts. I made mistakes, trusted the wrong people, and lost money. But now every failure was a learning experience. I no longer sought to prove anything to anyone. I sought to evolve, build something useful, and open doors for others like me. Gradually, I realized that my mission went beyond technology. It was to create opportunities and show that talent doesn't depend on a diploma or external approval. It was the realization of a dream that until recently seemed impossible. Even with everything progressing, there were days of insecurity. I wondered if I deserved to be there, if it was just luck or true competence. During these times, I remembered the late nights studying, the mistakes and the failed projects. I remembered the fear, the anxiety, the silent tears in college. All of it reminded me that nothing comes easy. I took a deep breath and kept going. I learned to value the difficult days as much as the triumphant ones, and to ask for help when needed. I assembled a small team, passionate about the project, and we transformed that isolated dream into something alive, pulsating and inspiring. For the first time, I felt I had created something bigger than myself. 2 years after the platform launched, I received an email that changed everything. It was from a tech company interested in acquiring the project. At first, I thought it was a scam. It seemed too good to be true, but it was real. They had been following my growth and wanted to make an offer. In the following weeks, I immersed myself in meetings, legal reviews, and negotiations. I, who had never participated in anything like this, was in front of executives discussing values I never imagined. I remember sitting alone one night, trying to absorb the scale of what was happening. The boy who cried in the college bathroom was about to sell something born from his own efforts. Life, I realized, is not linear. It tears down, rebuilds, and surprises those who have the courage. When I signed the contract, my hands were shaking. It wasn't just about the money, it was about meaning. Every mistake, every tear, every challenge had brought me to this point. The signature represented my journey: pain, doubt, fear, stubbornness, and faith. I spent a few minutes alone, breathing deeply, absorbing it all. For the first time, I felt true peace. Success wasn't a prize. It was the consequence of persisting when no one else believed. There were no noisy celebrations, just silence and gratitude. I had conquered myself, proven that my journey was worthwhile, even without a diploma, even without external approval. After the sale, my life changed profoundly. I began sharing my story in videos and lectures, not as someone who had overcome everything, but as someone who learned to get back up after every fall. I received messages from people across the country saying they felt inspired, that they finally saw a way out of their own insecurities and fears. The mission, I discovered, was greater than technology or money. It was to show that the value of a life lies in the courage to be true to yourself, even if it means being misunderstood for a time. Today, when I look back, I see that Arthur lost between fear and a desire for acceptance. I would tell him not to blame himself, to trust his own voice, to never give up in the face of judgment or failure. I learned that making mistakes isn't a weakness, but humanity. I learned that authenticity is the most valuable asset. When you're true to yourself, the rest falls into place. Every tear, every sleepless night, every seemingly impossible project, it was all part of the path that brought me here. And the lesson is clear. No one is born ready, but every attempt brings us closer to our truth. Despite my achievements, I still face difficult days, but today, I know how to better manage fear and anxiety. I understand that happiness isn't about never failing, but about finding purpose in every step, even when I stumble. My name is Arthur, and this is my story. From a young man under pressure, anxious and lost, to someone who learned that the greatest success is living authentically. Every challenge, every mistake, and every achievement has shaped me, and for the first time I feel genuine peace. The message I leave is simple. No one defines your story but you. Choose to listen to your voice and forge your own path, even if the world tries to convince you otherwise.